Hi guys, I'm live. I'm just gonna rap a little bit. No big deal, and nothing. I mean, no big intention or anything. I just want to talk a little bit to you guys. How you guys doing? Um, I want to start off. I have various things on my mind, but I just want to talk about some of them. For one thing, there's a skull on my mind. Just kidding, LOL. That's an ask me thing. Okay. As far as music instruction on YouTube, something tells me, to talk about that. Rick Beato is generic and good, but really good, really great. My favorite teacher and YouTube channel for learning music myself is the Jeff Berlin Music Group. I think it's just Jeff Berlin Music Group. That dude calls it like he sees it, and he's the greatest living bass player, and maybe the greatest bass player of all time, in one person. So take it or leave it. But when they give me Jeff Berlin via Jeff Berlin Music Group YouTube channel, I click on it almost every time, and in turn almost every time I learn something. So thank you, Jeff Berlin. I advise Jeff Berlin. I mean, Rick Beato, yeah, but did he play guitar? Did he play with Alan Holdsworth? LOL. Well, Jeff Berlin did. And that's just one of his many credentials. So anyway, that's just my food for thought, my 2 cents, or comments from the peanut gallery or whatever. Let's see, what else? I wanted to just talk about a couple things. Now this is I'm going to go back to music in a second, but this is tangential to that. It's not musical, but I want to talk about something that is, there's 2 cures for cancer that really exists in the world. Let this motorcycle make its noise. There's 2 cures for cancer that really exist. One is the actual cure that the government's had for 50 years. But that's a secret. And it's going to stay that way if they can have anything to do with it. But there's a second, I shouldn't say but there's also a second cure that I learned from Pastor Adam from At the Cross Church in Oceanside when I was, which I attended for a while. And Pastor Adam was really into fasting. It doesn't just get you blessed by God. Fasting allows your body to eat up everything that's impure in your body. And Pastor Adam said, and I believe him, and he has no reason to pull punches in my book. If you fast for 21 days, your body will eat the cancer in that time. It'll eat your cancer, and you will be cured. And then just go back to eating if you're still alive from 21 days of fasting, and you're done. So chemotherapy is garbage, not a cure, not even a good treatment. Love you guys. Now back to music. I want to talk about my own musical discoveries, some of them, and I've been watching Jeff Berlin Music Group too. So this is not something I learned on that, but he always opens my mind to music. Let motorcycles go. So anyway, Marvin Minsky was an MIT professor of artificial intelligence in the 80s and wrote a book called The Society of Mind. And he said in that he had an essay in that book, or has an essay in that book, called "Simple Things Are Hard." The simplest things are the hardest things. Robots had to learn to walk was much harder than just to compute things that we would find hard to do. But I'm going to applying that to music. Sometimes the most simple things to realize are actually the things that take the longest to dawn on a person. And I had one experience like that today. You would think the simple thing, and I'm going to say what it is that just dawned on me today, the understanding of it and the application, and all that, is a 5-to-1 progression in a major key. I mean, that's very simple. So in C major, it would be G to C, or G7 to C. Whereas C, when I say C, I mean C major. When I say G, I mean G major. When I say G7, I mean G dominant 7. 7th, actually, TH. So, but that just dawned on me today, the 5-1 progression in major, the most simple and fundamental progression in all of music, but it was so simple that it took me, I've already learned so many other things before that one particular thing dawned on me. And you would think the opposite. You would think I'd start learning the 5-1 in a major key and then get more complex. Well, that's actually not true. I learned a bunch of complex things, and now that I've learned a bunch of complex things, one of the most simple things in music theory just dawned on me finally today. So don't forget the 5-1 progression in a major key. Just for those that might want to be taught about that a little bit, let me just go on just a second, and then we'll end. Love you guys. Now, in a major key or a minor key, the 5 chord is always major or seventh, which is dominant seventh. You can have a minor 5 to minor 1 in a minor key, but then you just sound like you're in the mode of the major scale. It doesn't sound. The minor 5 chord doesn't really accentuate the minor 1 chord it's about to go to, because it just doesn't have enough pull or whatever. But if you make the 5 chord major and then go to a 1 minor key, you have a 5 to 1 in a minor key. And that does sound like you're in that minor key, not just the mode of the major scale that the 2 minor chords would be or are in. So basically the simplest things is a 5 to 1 in major, which is in C major would be G to C. And then a 5 to 1 in a minor key would be in A minor, E to A minor, where E is E major. And of course, when I said A minor, I mean A minor. And then of course, either of those two can be translated to any of the 12 keys. So you actually have 24 different progressions. So you have 12 5 to 1 in major progressions, and 12 5 to 1 in minor progressions. And those 12 and 12 keys make 24 keys, which is either 2 times 12 or 12 times 2. And that's why Paganini had 24 caprices. The 5th one is one that Steve Vai used in Crossroads, brilliantly, by the way. And then I think Bach had 24 caprices, not caprices, but 24 somethings for something in his writing. So it's basically all possible major or minor keys. And the fundamental chord progression in a minor key is a 5 to 1 minor, and the fundamental progression in a major key is a 5 to 1 major. So there's that. This is just dawning on me now that I've learned so many other complex things. This simple stuff is finally dawning on me. And while I'm at it, there's another thing I like to talk about in theory that dawned on me a while back, because it's actually harder than this. But there's a 4-7 to 1-7 in a blues progression. Now, let me explain something if you want to hear it. If you don't, then you wouldn't be watching. A 4-7 to 1-7 is the fundamental progression in a blues progression in the 1 key. So in B blues, it would be E7 to B7, where 7 is dominant 7th. So it would be E dominant 7 to B dominant 7. That's 4-7 to 1-7. Now you might be thinking, and probably should be thinking, why is it 4 to 1 in blues, and why is it 5 to 1 in classical, and how come blues has all 4-note chords? Because 7th chords, including dominant 7th chords, have 4 notes, whereas in classical music, some of the chords are only triads, which only have 3 notes. Well, that's just the difference in music. First of all, classical music uses triads with 3-note chords with diatonic scales, 7-note scales, whereas blues music uses 7th chords, 4-note scales with pentatonic scale. 7th chords, which are 4-note chords, with pentatonic scales, which are 5-note scales. So there's the dichotomy. And then jazz uses 4-note chords, which are 7th chords, with 7-note chords, which are diatonic scale. Jazz music uses 4-note chords, which are 7th chords, and 7-note scales, which are diatonic scales. And country music uses 3-note chords, which are triads, with 5-note scales, which are pentatonic scales. So you have 7-note scale, 5-note scale, which is diatonic and pentatonic scale, and you have triad and 7th chord, which is 3-note chords and 4-note chords. And you just put a square and 7-note, 7 and 4, 7-note scales, 4-note chords is jazz, 7-note scales and 3-note chords is classical, 5-note scales and 4-note chords is blues, and 3-note chords and 5-note scales is country. There's one other reason why it's 4 to, but that explains why there's 7 note chords in the blues progression. But why is it 4 to 1 in blues and 5 to 1 in classical? Well, this is interesting also. In triads, a 5 to 1 moves the voices up. In other words, it goes up. The voice. It's a leading tone. It goes from the major 7th degree to the up a half step to the tonic degree. But in 7th chord progressions, including dominant 7th chords, the 4 to 1 progression is upward moving. So an E7 to B7 actually moves upward. You'll find that the voices move upward by half steps, or in some cases whole steps. And you always want it's always more pleasing to the ear to have progressions that involve tones in the scale moving upward instead of downward. I don't know why. It just is that way. Upward moving by half step scale degrees progressions are called leading tones, and downward half step progressions with notes going down as the chords progress is called leaning tones. And leading tones seem to pull you to the tonic better than leaning tones. For example, a 5 to 1 in classical music is a leading tone progression, and it's very strong, whereas a 4 to 1 in classical music is a leaning. Whereas a 4 to 1 progression in classical music, which is triads, is a leaning tone progression. It's often called the amen progression. Amen. It's not as strong as the 5 to 1, the leading tone progression. In fact, I think 5 to 1 cadences are called authentic cadences, and 4 to 1 cadences are called plagal cadences, which is also called the amen cadence in classical music. So, but then in blues, it turns it around. In blues, if you go down a fourth, from 4/7 to 1/7, you go up and you lead the tone. So actually, in B blues, E7 to B7 would be leading tone, and F♯7 to B7, which is 5/7 to 1/7, would be leaning tone, not as strong.